The time is 8:55 a.m. and we are on the record on September 28th, 2016. This will be the video deposition of Judy O'Gorman, RN. Counsel, please identify yourselves.
My name is Clint Kelly. I represent Mr. Pemberton.
Margaret Moore for University Medical Center.
Carson King on behalf of Dr. Fortiche.
The court reporter is Trini Mitchell and will now swear in the witness.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Will you state your full name, please?
My name is Judy Faye O'Gorman.
Mr. O'Gorman, I'm taking your deposition day to determine what you'll testify to if you're called as a witness in the trial of this case. I'd like to get a couple of agreements out of the way before we proceed. First, I'd like you to agree to answer all of my questions to the best of your knowledge and information. Will you agree to do that?
I will.
Secondly, I'm going to rely on you to ask me to rephrase a question, otherwise I'm going to assume you understood it. That'll prevent misunderstandings in front of the jury. Will you agree to do that?
I will.
You work here at University Medical Center?
I do.
All right, how long have you been employed here?
35 years.
Well, you have a lot of time to reflect on. Can you tell me when you started here, were you an RN?
No, sir.
All right, where'd you start as?
I started as an LPN in the emergency department at McFarland Hospital at that time. And then we amalgamated with UMC in 1991, 92. And then I became an RN in 1990.
Now, for some of the jurors who may not know, will you describe what is the difference between an LPN and an RN?
It's years of education.
Does an LPN, strike that, does an RN have any more duties and responsibilities than an LPN?
Yes, sir.
And what are those?
They are overseeing other employees at times, mainly being supervisors.
But an LPN has the, for lack of a better term, the qualification to administer medications?
At that time, yes. We had, LPNs were allowed to administer more medications than LPNs are today.
All right. When did you become an RN?
1990.
All right. And where were you, again, for lack of a better term, stationed here at the hospital in 1990?
I've always worked in the emergency department.
I take it you weren't working the first time Mr. Pemberton came to the hospital when he had the CaviCide sprayed on him, were you?
No, sir.
All right. You were here the second time, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Tell me what role or position you had in the emergency department in August of 2015.
I was the ER director.
And what are the main duties and responsibilities did you have or do you have as the ER director?
Was the overseeing of the department, employees, doing policies, procedures.
Are you the superior of all the UMC employees that work in the emergency department?
At that time, I was their manager.
Was there anyone else who was your superior working in the emergency department at that time?
No, sir.
Let me start first with the CaviCide. Tell the jury what you know about CaviCide.
I know that CaviCide is a disinfectant that's usually used to clean beds, countertops, anything in a room.
All right. And are both nurses and the housekeepers responsible for cleaning with CaviCide?
At that time, yes, sir.
All right. And is CaviCide used, and I'm just sort of giving you an idea of what Nurse Tyree said, if we need to use it, we'll spray it and we'll use a washcloth and we'll wipe over the area to disinfect the area. Does that
Yes,
sound
sir.
about right to you?
Yes, sir.
And what kind of surfaces or areas do you disinfect with the CaviCide?
As I said, the beds, the bed rails, countertops, anything that is in the room that needs to be cleaned.
Is the CaviCide stored in a storage room?
It's supposed to be kept in the supply room.
The supply room, I'm sorry, I used the wrong word. So if a nurse or housekeeper needs to use it, they would go to the supply room and go get the CaviCide, take it, spray it, disinfect, and then return it to the supply room?
Yes, sir.
You agree with me, it's not supposed to be left out on the countertop in an examination room, is it?
No, sir.
It's not supposed to be left out on the countertop in a triage room, is it?
No, sir.
And what's the reason we don't leave it out on a countertop, say in the examination room?
As I said, it is a disinfectant.
It's a poison, isn't it?
Object to the form. You can answer.
You can answer.
I'm not sure that that it's a poison. It's a disinfectant.
Tell me what you know about CaviCide other than the fact that it is a disinfectant and sprayed to disinfect surfaces in the emergency department.
That it's, other than it's a cleaner, a disinfectant, I mean, I have used this many times myself to clean beds without gloves, with all my, with my hands, and have never suffered any injuries. I just know that it kills certain germs.
Would you agree with me the reason we don't leave it out on the tables in the examination rooms is so it's not accidentally sprayed on a patient?
I'm sorry, would you clarify that for me?
Would you agree with me one of the reasons University Medical Center does not leave, or the staff does not leave, CaviCide out on the table or countertops in the examination rooms is so it doesn't get accidentally sprayed on the patient's arm?
Yes, sir.
All right. Exhibit number 3 there, which I've also discussed with Mr. Tyree, is another type of spray. Do you recognize that bottle?
I recognize what it is.
Okay, and what is that bottle?
It's a wound cleaner.
Is that a wound cleaner that's used at University Medical Center to spray into patients' wounds?
This particular bottle looks different than what we had back then.
Okay. I'll represent to you that Mrs. Pemberton got that out of the examination room before she left University Medical Center. Can you dispute that that's not the bottle that you all use in the emergency department?
No, sir.
All right. Is that bottle, exhibit number 3, is that also maintained in the supply room?
It's maintained in a different room.
Which room is it maintained in?
It's maintained in another supply room that we have.
All right. So there's more than one supply room?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Tyree told me the supply room where the CaviCide is kept is in, best he could describe it, in the center of the emergency department. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Where's the other supply room where that second bottle, exhibit number 3, is kept?
Next door.
Okay. So there's 2 rooms next door to each other?
Yes, sir.
Is there any particular reason why you have 2 different supply rooms instead of 1?
One supply room is used for dirty instruments that we store, IV poles, this kind of thing. But it also has cabinets to where we can store the CaviCide. And then the other room is a clean supply room.
All right. Is exhibit number 3, is it supposed to also be maintained in the supply room after it's used?
No, sir.
All right, so it can be left out on the countertop in the examining rooms.
It's supposed to be destroyed after each patient use.
All right. Nurse, I should have visited this with you a little earlier. In the chain of command here at the hospital, and that's the term I use because that's the only way I understand these things, where do you fall? Because I know there's probably a director of nursing here at this hospital, isn't there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Where are you in relationship to the director of nursing?
Under the director of nursing.
Do you have the ability to hire personnel?
I had the ability to recommend a person for hire.
All right. Do you have the ability to fire personnel?
No, sir.
All right. Again, that might be a recommendation on your part.
It's a recommendation.
Are those responsibilities, at least in the nursing chain of command, reserved to the director of nursing?
Yes, also, and along with the personnel department or human resources.
All right. Any other supervisory, I'm trying to understand the extent of your supervisory authority, and it may sound technical to you, but it does have some significance to me. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you supervise the staff in the emergency department as the director?
I was responsible for interviewing new employees, was responsible for recommending the hiring, organizing their schedules for orientation. I was also responsible for staffing at that time, education.
Okay. That include training?
Yes, sir.
All right. When you say staffing, do you have some responsibility in setting the schedules?
Yes, sir.
I believe you also mentioned earlier, if I misunderstood you, that you have some role in policymaking.
I had a role in helping to develop policies
All right.
that affected the emergency department.
Anything else you can think of in your supervisory role? And that's pretty extensive. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything.
Oh, I'm sure there's other things that, I haven't mentioned, but I mean, there was a lot of things that we were responsible for.
All right. Now, we'll get back to the CaviCide. Prior to August 3rd of 2015, did you or any of your staff provide any training to either housekeeping or the nurses on the use of CaviCide?
Not particularly to CaviCide. All of the employees, including housekeeping, nurses, all the employees here at UMC have to go through an annual training. And one of those training pieces is to be able to identify chemicals, know where to go on the computer to look up an MSDS sheet.
And that's a material data safety sheet?
Yes.
All right. And are all the staff supposed to be familiar with the material data safety sheet for the chemicals that are used in the emergency department?
They're supposed to know if they need information on a chemical, where to go to obtain that information.
All right. Reason I'm asking this, and maybe I need to be a little bit more pointed in my questions, did the nurses who worked in your emergency department know that CaviCide is not meant to be sprayed on human skin?
To say they've been trained individually on a particular chemical, no, sir.
So, you or your staff did not train the nurses in the emergency department that CaviCide specifically could not be sprayed on human skin?
CaviCide particularly, no, sir.
Okay. Did your staff, strike that, did you train your staff that if CaviCide came in contact with human skin, that poison control was to be contacted?
Check to the form.
The staff would know that, if something like this happened, they were to notify the physician.
Mm-hmm. And how would the staff know that?
Here again, if the chemical was used, it's just known that if something like this happens, that you would notify the physician.
I understand you say it's known, but just for the purpose of the jury and myself, because we're not in the emergency department, we don't know how you all do business here. How do you make sure that it's known by the nurses that if that's sprayed on human skin, a doctor is to be contacted?
As I said, with going through the yearly training, to go through the to learn about the MSDS sheets, I mean, they would know through their training that if something happened, if it was something that was not particularly used, or if they know that it's a chemical, I mean, they would, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me, but
You may be making an assumption, and that may be the easiest way to get past this. Are you assuming that the nurses who work in the emergency department know that CaviCide is not to be sprayed on human skin?
yes, sir, I guess I am.
And are you assuming that the nurses in the emergency department know that if CaviCide is sprayed on human skin, a physician is to be contacted immediately?
During the orientation of the new nurses, you know, they are put with a trained nurse, and the trained nurses will go through the process of taking that new nurse and, you know, this is what we use to clean the beds, this is what we use to clean the counters, and they would know that it is a chemical, that it's, you know, it's a chemical that, or a disinfectant.
I understand, that's not my question. My question is, are you assuming that the nurses in the emergency department know that if CaviCide is sprayed onto human skin, a physician is to be contacted immediately?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because what I'm trying to find out is, I'll be very blunt with you, do you have any training here that you can point to and say, I know these nurses were trained about CaviCide. I know these nurses knew before Mr. Pemberton ever walked into that emergency department that CaviCide is not to be sprayed on human skin. And I know, because I know from the training, I've seen it with my own eyes, nurses know that if CaviCide is sprayed onto human skin, a physician is to be contacted immediately. You see where I'm driving at now?
Check to the form.
Can you tell me, I know they're trained on that. I've seen it, I've talked to them, my other charge nurses tell me the regular nurses are trained on it. Can you point me to anything other than I'm assuming this is done?
Check to the form.
No, sir, I can't.
Okay. Here's why I'm getting to this point. How did Jonathan Beard spray that into Mr. Pemberton's arm and think it was right?
Check to the form.
I don't know.
You see what I'm getting at here?
I do.
You're saying Nurse Beard should have known that you don't spray CaviCide on human skin.
Yes, he would have known.
You familiar with the standard of care here for nurses at University Medical Center?
Yes, sir.
And that would be a negligent act for Mr. Beard to spray that on human skin, wouldn't it?
Check to the form.
By any nursing standard in this county.
Check to the form.
The standards of care are guidelines that we go by. And I don't know what happened in that room that night. I don't know why Mr. Beard picked it up, or Dr. Fortige picked it up.
Well, my question is very specific. Would you agree that it would be a deviation from the standard of care for your nurse, Mr. Beard, to spray CaviCide on a wound of a patient in this hospital? Yes or no?
Check to the form. You can answer if you know.
I don't know.
How could it be within the standard of care? Nurse O'Gorman?
It is not in the standard of care.
Okay, so it's a deviation from the standard of care to do that, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Do you I'm sorry.
No, you,
Do you expect that your nurses would be familiar with the information on the bottle before they would spray a bottle onto human wounds?
Object to the form.
I don't know. I mean, not necessarily, no.
Okay, so you don't necessarily expect that if a nurse is going to spray a chemical into the patient's wound that they don't have to read what's on the bottle?
Object to the form.
I don't know if he read it or not.
I'm not asking you if you know whether he read it. He knows what he did, and I'll get to him when I take his deposition. I'm asking you, as the director of the emergency department at this hospital, do you expect that your nurses will read information on the bottle of a chemical they're going to spray into a patient's wound?
Object to the form.
I don't know if they would or not.
I'm not asking whether you know whether they do it. I'm asking your expectation. Are you saying you don't have an expectation?
No, sir, I'm not saying that I don't have an
Okay.
expectation.
I'm asking about your expectation, Nurse O'Gorman's expectation, the director of the emergency department's expectation. Do you expect that the nurse reads the information on the bottle of a chemical before they spray it into a patient's wound?
I would expect the nurses to know what they're cleaning with.
Well, again, can you explain to me why Nurse Beard would think it's okay to spray CaviCide into a patient's wound?
No, I cannot.
Are the nurses here trained on what they're supposed to do other than contacting a physician when CaviCide is sprayed on the human skin?
This has never happened, so they would contact the physician and go accordingly to what the physician ordered.
Can you tell me why that CaviCide was in Mr. Pemberton's room on the counter when he was sent to the examination room?
No, sir, I cannot.
You would agree with me that's not supposed to happen either, is it?
Not necessarily, but I don't know what happened I don't know. I was not there. I don't know.
I know you weren't there, and I'm not quibbling with you about what happened that day as far as your observations are concerned. I'm just asking you, again, putting on your emergency department hat, would you agree with me a bottle of CaviCide is not supposed to be sitting on the counter in an examination room?
No, sir.
And one of the reasons for that is that's to make sure that it's not accidentally sprayed into someone's arm, isn't it?
Object to the form. You can answer.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When we talked about training, I didn't mention housekeeping, and I should have, and that's my fault. This training about chemicals, do you also provide it to the housekeeping staff?
No, sir.
Okay. How does housekeeping know the chemical properties of CaviCide, if they know at all?
I'm not sure how they would know about particular disinfectants, but they go through the same yearly training that all employees go through.
So they would go through the training that the nurses would have about the use of chemicals?
About the use of chemicals, MSD sheets, MSDS sheets.
Okay. Do you?
That would come from their supervisor.
Thank you. And before I dive into your care, how is it in your judgment as emergency department director, that this can be prevented from happening? Spraying CaviCide into a patient's wound.
It was supposed to be removed from the room.
And Nurse Beard is supposed to know he's not to spray that into a wound, isn't he? I think you've answered that, haven't you?
I have.
All right, let's go to your care, which was the second visit. I have, Nurse, given you, that was Exhibit 1 to Nurse Tyree's deposition. We're going to go through the same chart. And what I'd like you to do is go through your entries in the chart, Nurse, and if there's anything else you remember, and I'll help prompt you through this, in addition to what's entered in the chart, feel free to put as much meat on the bones as you need to. Obviously, I assume you were there in the emergency department when he came in the second time, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Before we dive into your recording here in the chart, is there anything you independently remember about him coming into the emergency department?
I spoke with Mr. Pemberton and Mrs. Pemberton multiple times that day before he arrived in the emergency department.
And did you talk to him by phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell me what you recall about the substance of those conversations with him and with her.
I had called, it's routine for us to call patients back from the following day. And after I had been told about this situation, I called Mr. Pemberton to check on him, to make sure he was okay. And the phone conversation was very angry. They cursed me. So I ended the conversation.
Do you recall the time that you made the phone call to the Pemberton's residence to check on him?
No, sir. I don't know the particular time.
Can you give me an idea of approximately how long it was after he was discharged the first time?
It would have been in the morning. I don't know the particular time.
All right. Is there anything else about that conversation you remember other than the fact that they were cursing at you?
No, sir. I had other conversations with them that morning throughout the day. And each time that I spoke with them, it was the same type of conversation. They were demanding for pain medicine. They were very disrespectful. They were accusing, threatening, cursing.
Well, let's talk about each of those in order. First of all, you said that they were disrespectful. How were they disrespectful to you?
I was called bitch by Mrs. Pemberton multiple times.
Do you know why?
No, sir.
What were you asking them on the phone?
When the original call, I just simply identified myself, that I was doing a follow-up phone call and wanted to know how he was feeling.
Did at any time in that conversation the subject of the Vanderbilt burn unit come up?
Not in that phone call, no, sir.
Okay.
I mean, the first one.
Correct. Who told you what it, and I should have started this earlier, before we get into the subsequent conversations, who told you what happened at that first visit?
Daniel Tyree.
And what did Daniel Tyree tell you?
He just related the incident from the night before, that he just related that Mr. Pemberton had come to the emergency department, what his injuries were, and that CaviCide had accidentally been sprayed upon the wound.
Was that all that you remember Mr. Tyree telling you?
He told me also that after the wound had been sutured and the CaviCide had been sprayed. Mr. Pemberton come out to the nurse's station and was very angry, threatening to sue, demanding that Dr. Fortige redo his wound care.
What else did Mr. Tyree tell you?
I don't remember any other specifics.
Did you have an opportunity to look at the chart before you made a phone call to Mr. Pemberton?
I don't remember.
The electronic chart